Hi, everyone. Welcome to the official launch day for Sanctuary. Thank you so much for joining. And again, I'm talking right now mostly for the replay folks, so that there's not that lovely awkward gap right at the beginning. But we are back for launch day. Willow is coming to join me. And my good friend Anna Campos from Circle of Stitches is going to be our guest today. And I'm just adding her. This is so delightful. And we're going to get started as soon as Instagram decides to let us get going. Hi, my love.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm good. It's so nice to see you.
You too, Willow. I need you to go on the other side so you don't knock over the camera.
I just had that same argument with Tal, who was like jumping in my face in front of her. I'm like, not right now, buddy. Not right now. So, I'll be back.
This is gonna be so fun. So for those of you who don't know Anna owns my dream shop in Salem, Massachusetts, Witch City, and it is literally a combo yarn shop and witch supply store with beautiful stacks and candles and kits and all of the lovely things. And when I first, this is actually also the fourth bizanniversary for Sunflower Knit. I went full time with the business on this day 4 years ago, and Anna reached out to me when I made the announcement in my newsletter. I was like, "Hey, I'm doing this. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I'm doing it anyway." And Anna was like, "Let me help. What can I do? I want to do whatever." And I was like, "Okay." And we have become very good friends in the years since. She's a delight and just like such a wonderful human and support in the industry, and just like always is up for supporting all the good things. And so I really love her, and you should also love
Ooh, thank you.
her. So Anna, tell us maybe a bit about yourself and your journey and the shop, and then we'll also get into your definition of sanctuary.
Well, so as Ash mentioned, I own Circle of Stitches in Salem, Massachusetts. I opened my shop in 2015. It's hard to believe it's been 7 years. Oh my God.
Pandemic.
I know, right? I can't believe we survived the pandemic. And I started out as a yarn dyer under Toil and Trouble. And I have been, completely supporting myself with my shop and my work now since like late 2019, which is pretty crazy to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I am originally from Brazil, so I'm a Latina, I'm an immigrant, and now I live in Salem, Massachusetts, which was a dream that I had as like a little baby witch at like 14 years old in Brazil. So it's pretty exciting. Um, and when I first started my knitting shop and my like sort of fiber industry professional journey, I never felt like my work as a witch and my work as a fiber artist would ever intersect. Even in Salem, even though it's very welcoming to witches, there's kind of a split between like the witch folks and the non-witch folks. And so I kind of like started dipping my toes into bringing tarot and knitting together. And now I'm super excited that it seems like the fiber industry is excited about tarot and sort of these more spiritual journeys. So, just sort of, people seem to think that I know what I'm doing, and I admit I'm totally not. I'm just like making it up as I go. And I'm excited that like people seem to like the stuff that I'm inventing. So,
Because it's always delightful. Yeah, I feel like that's always the way. It's like we look really polished online, and then like behind the scenes, we're like texting each other, like, "What the fuck?" I don't know.
I don't know what's happening. Yeah. And I appreciate that we've been able to form that kind of friendship and community. So I love it.
Makes me real happy. So let's talk about your definition of sanctuary. So the Sanctuary Hub, like I mentioned, is live now, and the kind of goal of it, besides supporting the work as I'm writing the actual book Sanctuary that will come out hopefully sometime next year, um, is to help people be able to like define and build and create and craft their own sanctuary, but everybody's got a personal definition of that. So, what is yours?
Well, so I've been thinking about that for the last few days, and I feel like I'm gonna figure out this definition as we talk because when I really started thinking about it, I was like, right, when did I first come across the word sanctuary? And honestly, I feel like it's from like movies and like old cartoons where it's people like looking for sanctuary in church buildings, and that idea that churches were supposed to be this safe haven, that anyone can show up and request sanctuary and be protected. So I think that that was sort of my first encounter with it. And it's interesting to think of it that way because my own relationship with the Catholic Church, I grew up Catholic, I was an altar girl, has been very, very complicated. And so I can't say that I still view the church in the same way. And, that's always kind of a scary thing to say on live video because it's a complicated thing to say in public.
If people want to hear more about it, then they can listen to our Snort and Cackle episode way back in season 1.
Yeah. But so I think for me the idea of sanctuary is a place where you can feel completely safe and embraced and know that that is a safe space. So I think that sanctuary and safe space are very linked, but I feel like sanctuary adds this idea of the sacred on top of safe space, right? I feel like there's that kind of that added level. And even the word sacred is kind of a complicated word because I feel like when I say sacred, I don't necessarily tie it to religion, but rather to the ways that we're honoring ourselves and honoring the world, which can be, spiritual, can be religious depending, but it doesn't have to be necessarily linked to that. But I do feel like there's that sort of recognition of sacred space in conjunction with safe space with that word. So that's kind of where I'm at, I guess.
It's such an interesting thing. Like so many of these words have religious connotations, and because of the way that organized religion just like fucks with everything, it has made those words have a lot more like negativity attached to them. But I also think like through the conversations that I've had with various folks over Snort and Cackle, like when we keep coming down to it, religions at their core and spiritual practices at their core come back to like answering life's big questions and helping us to like navigate the uncertainty that is being a human, and trying to like provide some general like guidelines that, again, when you like take things back to their core, it's like be a good human, help one another, be kind, like support one another. And then the systems of power are the things that corrupt those things. But I feel like words like sanctuary and sacredness also like they have become twisted in different ways because they are associated with these structures of power. But when we bring them back to like those core things, having safe space and having places where you feel completely held, and sacredness as being like not related to a specific religious practice, but as being like something that is more than ourselves, is like those are not bad things as far as I'm concerned, but it's so interesting trying to like untwist these words and figuring out like how do we navigate things and language, where the language has nuance and the history of it all has nuance. And but how do we kind of figure out for ourselves what feels good?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm obviously I'm going to veer into tarot now because that's how we do. Idea of sort of distilling the original intent and sort of sacredness of everything apart from sort of all the ways that we've fucked them up as humans has been a big part of my work over the last few years. And even with revisiting the tarot archetypes and refiguring out my relationship with different cards, like the Hierophant is a big one and the Emperor is another big one.
Yes.
That archetypes are generally we're looking at the inherently positive side of things, and yet society manages to like ruin them in so many ways. And going back to like the original sacredness of that, we'll talk a little more about this later, but part of my work for our Llama's Fiber Witch box, which by the way launches today, is working with solar magic and figuring out, what's the spell that I'm putting together for the peak of summer, which is very much about solar energy and the divine masculine and the within, feminine and gender nonconforming spaces has become something that's seen so negatively. But in reality, all of us carry, the divine feminine, divine masculine, everything in between. And what does it mean to embrace the divine masculine outside of gendered roles? And the idea of feeling entitled to take up space. And that's something that's really important. And so that's the idea that I'm sort of centering the Llama's Fiber Witch box about, is that idea of like your sacred right to exist in this space.
Yeah. I love this this discussion of tarot for it, because I like, through doing quite a few different projects with tarot through knitting, like with my swatching the tarot, and then um, just like a bunch of different things as I've kind of like built different relationships with different cards. And as we've discussed this many times with like Vogue and with ourselves and all of these things, um, there's certain cards where it feel like, for me as a non-binary femme, I used to have actually a really hard time with Empress energy, and I felt more attuned with High Priestess energy because that one was like a little bit more up here. But the embodiment of the Empress was something that like felt really weird for my body at times. And now I'm like, no, this is like, when I think of Sanctuary, this whole project, I'm like, it is fully Empress energy, like all of that just rooted that way. But the Emperor card is like, they are, they're juxtaposed against one another as being like opposites. But stop it. As far as I'm concerned, they're like two sides of the same coin, and they actually work best in tandem with one another. But I think it's really interesting how traditional tarot, like we look at these things as binaries, which is the way that our society looks at so many things. And it's like, well, this is good and this is bad. And this is like the good side of this, but if it's reversed, then this is a bad thing. And I feel like when we apply queer theory to our tarot readings, then it's like, okay, but it's not bad. It's the shadow side, and shadows are also not bad. They are trying to tell us something, and they are perhaps out of balance, or perhaps they are providing balance. But like, if we like interrogate and open ourselves up to what is our relationship to this thing right now, and what is this trying to tell us, our shadows can actually be trying to protect us. They can be offering us a lot of lessons, and it might not feel super comfortable, but they're also necessary. And so, oh my God. So it's like, it makes it interesting when we think of, like cards like death and the devil and the tower. And in reality, those cards they're all just part of the cycle. Like when you look at the major arcana, it's just one big cycle, right? And it's like, okay, you're at this stage of the cycle, and that's not a bad thing, and it's actually a very necessary thing. And in fact, when it gets uncomfortable, it's that we're getting stuck in it, right? Like that's often what happens when you're dealing with reversals. It's that you're stuck at that stage, and it's, you either have to wait or you have to figure out like, what do I need to do to get unstuck?
Yeah, and going back to the idea of sanctuary, I feel like sanctuary is a container where you can do things like move through the death card and the tower card and have the space to not just move through them, but integrate the lessons, right? So sanctuary definitely has that feeling of container. But I also want to go back to what you were saying about the Empress card. And all of these archetypes are really hard to embody and understand. Like even me, my pronouns are she, her, they. I definitely identify as female, but sort of not just, I guess I would call it femme plus at this point, right? Because it just feels like I don't feel like I'm strictly within the binary, but definitely heavy, on the femme side. But there was a lot of distilling the existence of a female into the maiden mother crone archetype, and how do you live the mother archetype if you've chosen to not have biological children with your female body. And I've done a lot of work as understanding how to reimagine that archetype within a contemporary context, right? Which, thank goodness for birth control, which allowed female bodies to start making choices about that. But we still embody that archetype. It's just the idea of being a creatrix, and it's about creating and nurturing and birthing things that are important to us, that we're putting out into the world, and that extends so far beyond biological reproduction. And so I think it's really interesting that you're embodying that Empress archetype right now with the things that you're creating. And part of the things that you're creating is a sanctuary, which is sort of a incubator for other people to be able to create. And so there's kind of this like layered incubation Empress thing that you're doing.
It's very fun. I love that point though of like, like if you are choosing to not have biological children either because you don't want to, or like maybe you haven't chosen that and it's just like that's the cards you've been dealt. And the way that society still, like does not look at stepchildren as a set, like if you're choosing to parent in a specific kind of a way where like adoption isn't looked at in the same way. And there's like these weird hierarchies that we place on the kind of like how you build a family. And then I think of queer family and how like that's a a community where it's a lot more common for us to not have biological children with like both biological parents involved in the family unit. Like there's broader terms that we have had to come up with and broader definitions of how we define family, where family for us means many, many other things than just like nuclear bio, that sort of thing. And I think there's so much beauty in that, but also like if you don't like whether or not you are parenting in that like very specific kind of a way, there are so many things that we birth into existence. Like literally I always refer to my books as book babies because they take honestly longer to birth than if I were to give birth to like a human sprout. But it's like that time of like incubating it and like that first like little idea, and then it like gets to the stage of like, oh my God, there's just like so much to do. There's like this huge, amount of work in front of me, and it's like really uncomfortable. And then eventually it comes out and you're like, okay, cool. Now it's going to like have its own life away from me. And but it takes, many, many, many months / years to bring into existence. And I always think of bigger projects as being these like incubation. It's almost like birds where like they like lay an egg and then they're going to like sit on it for a while. And then eventually like little cracks start to show. And then eventually it comes out and starts doing its own thing. And that's kind of what I feel like creative projects end up being, whether that's that you're, pulling together the fabrics that are eventually going to become a quilt, or you're writing a book or a series of short stories, or you are like making sourdough bread. Like there's everything that we create is its own kind of little birthing journey. This is really weird languaging to be using at this particular point in time, but
by the way, side note, I love the phrase human sprout. I'm using that like forever. I'm stealing that.
my friend said it, and I was like, because I've been for years referring to my eventual children as my spawn, because also like to me, I'm gonna raise like weird little genderless dinosaurs that are going to run around. In reality, I'm probably going to end up raising a cishet kid against like all of the things that I tried to do, and I will still love them. I'll just be very confused. But
that's I think a really important thing, and part of parenting is definitely realizing that like, yes, you created this being, but this being, while it's part of you, it's not an extension of you, and it's going to have its own life and it's going to be its own thing.
Yeah,
and
just have to
happen. That's the thing that happens in the creative process. Like we hear authors talking about how there's a point where the story becomes a story and it's no longer in your control. And I feel like that's true of yarn dyeing. Like I might start with an idea and then it becomes its own thing. Creating, writing a pattern, designing things like my fiber witch boxes. Like as much as I have a starting point, I can tell you that I have never had it's never ended up exactly where I think it's going to at the end. There's always a point where the energy starts dictating where it goes. And so it's very much that idea of you create a thing that becomes its own entity, right? And it has its own life. It's not something that you are entirely in control of. And it's really beautiful.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's like even less control in the end result there, because with your fiber witch boxes, you're always pulling together work from different artisans, which like makes it so beautiful. But it's like you create the container for what it's going to look like, and you're like, okay, you reach out to specific people. Like we've worked on most of the boxes together, and it's like, okay, I want, this is like the theme that we're going with, this is the solstice that we're working with, or the equinox or whatever. And so like I think I want this for the box, but then like I make the thing. You don't know what it's going to end up being. Same with whoever else ends up creating things to then pull together. And they always create these beautiful, very curated and very cohesive collections. But like whatever was in your head initially is not what the end result ends up being. And I feel like that's actually like a necessary part, I think, too, of the creative process. Like as somebody who grew up in theater world, like to me, the editing portion of the process is like the core part of it. It's like you create something, but if the thing that you create is the exact same from beginning to end, you've actually not done your job properly. Like you have not gone through the refinement process of it.
Right, absolutely. It needs to have that ability to evolve on its own and sort of tell you what it wants to be, right? And you have to sort of respect what the thing that you're creating wants to be. And
Yeah.
you know, also apply that to parenting.
Yes, also that. Yeah, I mean, it's so it.
Going to be what it's meant to be, and it has nothing to do with what you wanted for it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like when I think of like with the Sanctuary Hub, a big part of it was I was like, okay, we're spending so much time working on these things. And honestly, like a big part of why I even considered it was when I got word from the publishing house that like so this is the fourth book that I'm writing. And the third book, Kutch, we tried to come down to you to photograph. And COVID, like we started the book pre-COVID, and then COVID happened, and the plan had actually been to go. So, for those of you who know the book, Kutch, it's a book of 10 shawls. They're all knit with Harrisville Designs, Nightshades Yarn, and Harrisville Mill is very close to where you are. And so, the plan was that I was going to design these witchy shawls, come down to see Anna, shoot them around Salem, go to the mill, be able to take photos at the mill. It was going to be this like beautiful witchy thing. And then fucking COVID happened literally 2 months before we were supposed to come down for the photo shoot. And so everything had to change. And the end result is still really beautiful. But that was like, we had to be flexible with it. And so now with Sanctuary, we were thinking, okay, like we know that we need to be extra flexible. So we'll kind of like be willing to adjust and kind of make plans with the assumption that a lot of things are potentially going to have to change. But then I got word from the publishing house or the print house that we use that they, like everybody else in printing world, I don't know if folks are noticing that like a lot of books that you might love are being announced like a year in advance, with pre-orders being offered a year in advance. And that's because the delays in printing are that long. Like I used to be able to print my books and have them in hand in a 6 to 8 week time frame. So it was like we could offer pre-orders and know that within a couple of months we're going to be shipping books out to people. Now it's a minimum of 6 months in advance that you need to be confirming your orders and putting deposits down. And hopefully in those 6 months you will have your books in hand. It's more likely going to be even longer than that. And so I was like, well, I'm like, that just is shitty. And also how do you make a guess of how many books you're going to need when it's so many months before you'll actually have them in hand? And how can I reasonably take people's money that far in advance when I don't know when I'm going to be able to give them their books? And so then it was like, okay, how do we kind of work around this? And then I thought, well, there's so much of this creative process of writing these books that we don't get to share with people. I think the knitting industry, I don't know, Anna, if you've like seen a shift. I feel like it's starting to shift a little bit, but like people historically are so precious about their creative ideas and they hold on to the idea until right before it's ready to be released. And I don't love that. It feels very scarcity rooted, but also like for these big book projects, it takes so much time and labor. And to be hiding that for like 2 to 3 years and then waiting until the like month before they're available to be able to release them out to folks, I'm like, okay, well, that's what am I going to be able to show people in those 2 to 3 years in the interim? but also there's so much cool stuff that I get to be working on and that I'm so interested in that then I don't get to share with people. And so that's where the Sanctuary Hub came into play, where it was like, okay, here's all of these things that are influencing my work right now. Here's all of the like behind the scenes. Here's stuff that maybe isn't going to end up in the final book, but like here, have access to it if you want. And so there's like recipes and things that like I don't think are going to end up in the final book, but it's like stuff that is still very much related to the project and what's influencing it right now.
No, COVID has been an interesting experience as, you know, a self-employed creator. Obviously, COVID is very, very horrible, right? The pandemic has been terrible. It's hurt us in so many ways. But it's also forced creative people, you know, self-employed creatives to be creative in completely new ways so that we could survive. And so COVID has really been a very powerful creativity incubator for me. You know, like I'm casually mentioning, oh, like, yes, our Llamas Fiber Witch box. But honestly, what happened was it was October 2020, which is, you know, October's supposed to be, you know, peak tourism season in Salem. And it's what so many of us depend on to survive as small businesses. And we were shut down. And
Right.
I thought to myself, like, well, maybe there's a handful of people out there who are interested in having a little bit of Salem magic. And I'm going to just really put myself out there bringing together witchcraft and yarn. And it's almost been 2 years now, but at that point, honestly, it felt really terrifying. And so I started with a little collection of like just little 12 boxes of here's a thing that I created, and people loved it. And so I reached out to you and was like, oh, do you have more stuff you can send me? Because I put out another set, and it was never intended to be like, oh, I'm just going to try this out, see what happens. And I thought if it goes well, I'll do it every October. But then it went well, so then I did one for the winter solstice, and then people liked that. And so now I'm doing 4 a year. And you know, I usually do one for the the first spring for Litha, and I didn't get around to it because my life is very complicated right now. And people started emailing, being like, "Is there one coming? Are you doing one?" And I was like, "Okay, folks, we're doing a summer one this time." But just the fact that now it's something that people anticipate, and I actually put it up on my website like a week ago without announcing it because I hadn't even fully figured it out. And I didn't announce or anything, it was kind of hidden, and people were like finding it and pre-ordering it. So like it's become a thing now that people are excited about.
That's
It's absolutely mind-blowing.
that's another thing that like again, COVID has, like you said, been super shitty, super harmful, and also has forced really interesting creativity. And I think the other thing that's really good about it was that it forced people to start thinking about how do we make things more accessible to folks who either are not able to come, like especially for brick and mortars, where it's like people cannot all come to visit us. And so how do we make things available to people so that like it's not as though people weren't forced to isolate themselves from society or were forced by society's restrictions to be isolated pre-COVID, right? Like there's so many immunocompromised folks that like could not easily, safely be navigating society pre-COVID. My dad's in a wheelchair, and there's like we're like in a country that theoretically is supposed to be accessible, and it's not. Like there's very few countries in the world that have actually prioritized accessibility to a state where folks that use like any sort of mobility aid can actually get around comfortably through the majority of spaces. And so I think of all of these folks that like have not been able to like come into shops or go to festivals or do all of these different things. And then COVID forced all of these shops and organizations and conferences and things to figure out, okay, if everyone's stuck at home, how do we bring ourselves into people's homes? And I think it like obviously it creates a different kind of experience, but it's still so cool, like you said, to be able to like send people some of that Salem witchy magic, even if they can't come to Salem, and even if you can't have the shop open for people to come and see you. And I think that there's like a lot of value in that people are like that you're able to figure out something that works well for your business, and that other people who may not get to come to Salem are able to get something from you that's this like beautifully curated like mini version of what it would be like if they were to come to the shop.
Well, I mean, this idea of like sanctuary is really just like bouncing around in my head now because my whole goal with the shop has sort of been to create sanctuary, right? Create sanctuary for people to be creative and, sort of be sacred in a place where they can be seen. And that's something that I really struggled to sort of manage to do online because, again, people were very much focused on what's present in front of them. And COVID really forced people to turn online. And so I've been able to connect with people online in a way that I hadn't been able to before. And a lot of folks who are immunocompromised or, have limitations with mobility have reached out and told me how appreciative they are that now they have access to all of these things. But also as COVID started getting better, because I'm still very hesitant to use that.
As we've started pretending that it doesn't exist.
Right. Like, I guess the world's just now like, whatever. A lot of places then started discontinuing the online programs that they had created during COVID. And I reached out to me and say, like, please don't stop because this is a way that we can participate. And so now I'm at that challenge of, how do I sort of resume things in person while maintaining the online side of it, because all these people who now had access to what we're doing, I don't want to now turn around and be like, all right, well, now the pandemic's down, like, bye.
And it's also that thing of like balancing, you've got limited capacity, right? Like there's only so much that you as a solopreneur or as a boss with like a small team can be maintaining. And I recognize that as being a limitation for a lot of folks. Like I'm really lucky in that I don't have a brick and mortar. And so like the Creative Coven community, which is where the Sanctuary Hub is situated, it's like a big, robust addition to it. But by joining the Sanctuary Hub, you're actually getting access to the entire community. And I started that at the beginning of COVID because I had folks reaching out and being like, we want resources. We want to be able to connect with one another. We want the ability to have community. And so I'm like, cool, I'm not going to stop my monthly knit nights in the community just because, people are able to be moving around in their own cities again. Like it's a global group that comes together. It's not like all of these folks are suddenly going to appear and show up in my living room. Also, I don't want people showing up in my living room. And so like, I don't have to stop that, but I also don't have to like figure out, okay, how do I do this at the same time that I'm hosting in-person classes again and in, like trying to do knit nights like in the store. Like how do you kind of balance those things?
I'm still figuring out. I have not restarted in-person knit nights because a lot of the folks who were my like local regulars have been attending our weekly online knit nights, and they appreciate that they don't have to drive over, right? And that they can be at home and comfortable. But I'm doing once a month outdoor knitting in person, waterfront, and that seems to be working out pretty well. But that was the thing that was very surprising about COVID, is that ultimately the people that really sort of stuck by us and by why we were doing it was our online folks, right? It wasn't our local in-person community that like they weren't showing up as much to do in-person shopping appointments and all that. Like they kind of disappeared, and now 2 years later they're showing up like, oh yeah, hey, we're back. And I'm like, well, I'm not still here because of you folks. Like you've been gone for 2 years, and my online community has been what has kept me going. And so those are the folks that I'm really going to pour my heart and soul into creating community for, because they're the ones who showed up.
Totally. It's so interesting. Like I've definitely had, I would say that like my local folks that pre-COVID were supporting me then just like doubled down during the pandemic, which I really appreciate. And like, but I think also part of that is because again, like I didn't have a brick and mortar that I was managing. And so if anything, like I feel like I made things more accessible during COVID, including for the local folks. And I think also part of it is that people started looking for like what is available. And so the fact that I was already partially online pre-COVID, then when I shifted things fully online, it wasn't a drastic shift. It also didn't take me as long to be making those shifts as it did for other folks. And I think also with the teaching classes, that's something where I love teaching in person, but I also think that there's a lot of value in being able to either access self-paced recorded stuff, which is the majority of my programs online, or to be able to teach like via Zoom, like with Vogue and with your fiber retreat, and being able to do those things where people don't need to leave their homes and they can actually just like be able to access all of these teachers that like maybe wouldn't have been able to come and hang out, right? Like there's also a limitation to how many teachers are able to travel, you know, if they're needing to cross borders, can they get those work visas? Like all those things make it trickier to be able to actually like be able to learn from different folks. And so, you know, doing like the fiber retreat online gave people the option who otherwise wouldn't have been able to come and join, to come and participate and get to have some of that fun.
So I'm curious about the Sanctuary Hub. Can you tell me a bit about what's going on in there?
Yeah, you're so cute. Um, basically, like it started as, like I said, when I got word from the printing press that we weren't going to be able to just like print the books, turn them around as quickly as we used to. I was like, oh fuck. And then I was also thinking like there's still a solid year of like getting the work finished, getting the photo shoot done, and then getting the final drafts ready, and then getting it to the printer. And then we're looking at another 6 to 8 months before we'll have the book. But meanwhile, I'm devoting like full-time hours basically to the projects right now, on top of the rest of the things that the business is involved with. And and also there's costs associated with it, right? Like even though the production side of it right now, as I'm working on the different projects that are going to be included in the book, I've got most of what I need. There's also the costs of like flying to Nova Scotia to do our photo shoot. We're going to need, you know, extra things once we're there. Like we're going to need food for the models, and we're going to need to like be able to gather everybody together. And so there's costs associated with doing these creative projects pre actually printing the books, and printing the books is a whole other thing. Kutch was a 5-figure bill all at once, which I was able to do at that time because there had been enough pre-orders that had come in. But now I'm like, okay, if we're not going to have those pre-orders, what do we do? And also, I love making these book babies. Like I said earlier, I come from theater world. And for me now, books have become my like productions that I pull together. And so the Sanctuary book is going to be like a further extension of like what I did with Kutch, where Kutch was knitting patterns and recipes, and people can actually, I think, grab copies from you. I don't know if there's still copies available, and also grab copies from me of that book. But then also they can grab the hair spill yarn from you. But then also with Sanctuary, I was like, okay, I want knitting patterns, I want recipes, but I also want sewing patterns. So there's going to be a quilt pattern in the book. There's going to be different body care recipes. There's going to be just like so many beautiful things. And I wanted people to be able to see, like, I'm so surrounded by this work right now and by the inspiration sources of this work, that I wanted people to be able to share that with me as I'm going through the process. And the other thing is that, like, with my design students, I often get questions of like, well, how do you even do this? Like, how do you make a book? And I'm like, okay, that's a great question. I had to figure that out with my first book back in 2016, I think. And I just kind of was like, let's do this. And kind of fumbled my way through it. And now I've done it enough times that I'm like, okay, let's share what this process actually looks like and what are the different steps that are involved, and then what are the inspiration sources. There's like a shit ton of resources because Sanctuary, so I was inspired to create Sanctuary back when COVID first started because I was so deeply missing other people, and especially missing my dear ones. And I also, like, all of my Sagittarius came roaring to the front, and I was like militantly hunting for joy. And I was like, fuck this shit. I need happy endings. This is shitty. And that was kind of what the first initial spark was. And so it's very much about like finding joy, prioritizing care and kindness, and being with those that we love. Um, and and how do we craft that, and how do we kind of like build these ideas in our personal lives and in our immediate spaces. And it's also boudoir style photography because I was like, why not? That sounds like fun. Uh, and so all of those things have kind of come together into the hub in terms of the resources. So there's like a whole bunch of, books and programs and things that people can look into if they're interested in herbalism for aphrodisiacs or for like reproductive health care. And then recipes and like yummy, delicious drinks. And then one of the things that came as a result of the boudoir style photography specifically was that for me, when I'm knitting patterns, I'm not interested in things that I don't find super practical. So I wasn't like, okay, I'm going to do boudoir style photography, therefore I'm going to knit wool bras and booty shorts. Like that's not my thing. It's that doesn't sound attractive to me. Also, it's not the most practical just in terms of like recovery of the fabric if you wear it too many times. And so, but what is super attractive to me is like super tall hand knit socks. And so I went about trying to create patterns, realized that the patterns that are currently out there on the market for knee-high socks and taller are like very limited in their sizing. And so I had no reference points for like, okay, what basic math am I even looking at if I'm going to design my own? And then I started trying to find like, are there old formulas? Like this is how we used to make clothes, was we would knit our own socks. And so is there like old book formulas? And again, the math didn't really work. And so then I had to go and start creating my own. And I realized that to create a custom fitting knee-high sock recipe, which was my goal to put into the book, it's more complicated than you can nicely put into like 1 or 2 pages. But it's absolutely doable when you're given enough space and hyperlinks to like click to the different like math formula sheets. And here's a video class and here's some diagrams. And so while there won't be a pattern in the book that tells you how to knit the knee-high socks that are being photographed, there will be other sock patterns that are in the book. But I modified one of those sock patterns using then this formula for a custom fitting knee-high sock. And so in the Sanctuary Hub is what turned out to be a flop for the book in that I wasn't able to make that pattern work out, but I was able to make an entire class into how to create your own custom fitting knee-high sock. And so that's kind of like I imagine as I continue working through the projects for the book, it's going to continue being more of that, where it's stuff that's like, okay, this was what I had initially planned. It's like what we were talking about earlier with the editing process. It's like, this was initially planned to go into the book. Now, as I'm, filling out all the gaps, it's not fitting perfectly, but it is absolutely still related and relevant. And so here it is over in the hub. So, yeah.
I have to say, one of my biggest regrets is that we live so far away from each other, because I actually lived like within driving distance of each other. We create like so much amazing stuff together. Um, so I'm just going to put out into the universe that like we need to have a sanctuary retreat. We need to call Ro, right? We all just need to go like seclude ourselves in a cabin for like 2 to 3 weeks and like make some intense witchy fiber shit and come out of it like with like a joint project. So
oh my God. Also, okay, so the Creative Coven Challenge, speaking of like projects, the Creative Coven Challenge, which is my swatching challenge, we're doing a sanctuary themed live round of it from July 11th to 15th. So, and because it's the specific sanctuary theme, then we've got like a brand new mood board, brand new playlist. Everybody gets to like take the inspiration that I have been playing with and start swatching and playing with it themselves. So we're going to do that. That's going to be fun. But now I'm like, we basically need to like take that and put it on steroids and do this entire retreat. And I think that sounds super fun.
we need one that's just like a creative retreat for us, but I'm also now thinking like, all right, like who wants to join in and do like an entire like Fiber Witch Sanctuary retreat? Come hang out with us. We'll do like drum circles and learn tarot and some like grounding, because Rochelle is a druid. So seriously, this needs to happen.
Yes.
Like comments and tell us like if you'd like to join in on this, because I'm very excited. And sometimes I get in my head and I'm like, all right, no one else is going to be excited about this thing that I'm excited about, but I'm going to go ahead and believe that there are other people that are going to want to come and like.
Yes. Absolutely. I think we need to just like stick a poll in the stories after the fact and be like, so did you watch the live? And also, what do you think of this idea? Because I think that would be a fabulous project.
Well, I was literally talking to my, monthly tarot study group that I lead about doing like a tarot based retreat, and which I didn't think anyone would do. And they were like, "Yes, please." But then like most of those people are also knitters, and that's how they found me. So like, let's do this. It's gonna
Uh,
happen.
I love this idea. I think, oh my God, it would be such a fun way of like, once the book is actually like ready for the world to just like have this beautiful, like, not even a traditional book launch, but just be like, if you want to come and celebrate, we're going to be like making magic, literally, in the woods somewhere. This would be so much fun.
Let's do it. Let's make it happen.
Okay, I'm totally down for this. This sounds great. This is what happens when Anna and I talk, people. We just like plan out.
Yeah. All right. Like I'm just pretending this is like a private you and me phone call right now. Like I know there's, this is technically alive, but yeah, but this is what happens behind the scenes. Like this is how the ideas happen, sort of like out of nowhere, right? Like we just kind of word vomit and then like things happen.
Such a good idea, though. I think like that would be such a lovely way of, because we've also been talking for several years about like what would it be like to make like a really witchy retreat that is also like for, and like you run the fiber witch retreat and that one's, or the fiber retreat, but like to shift it even witchier and like incorporate like all these different crafting projects that are still very rooted in magic. And I also there's like a few extra DIY tutorials that are going to end up in the hub over some time, including like some fun little like crafting spell work that I'm really excited about. And I feel like it would be really fun to be able to do that in like like over a weekend with a bunch of people.
Obviously, natural dyeing because that's super witchy. We can do
Yes.
our own inks and like it's gonna be amazing.
Ugh, I love this. Folks, feel free to also like pop into the comments or comment if you're watching the replay on the replay post what classes you would like to see or like where you would potentially want to go. I'm totally down for making this happen. Year-wise, we're probably looking at like 2024 is my guess, or maybe 20, probably 2024. Um,
And I don't want to wait that long. We'll see.
I mean, you and I can do something beforehand.
Fair enough. Yes.
This,
Before this calendar year ends. It's been too long. This is ridiculous.
I know. Oh God, Rhinebeck was so much fun. We stayed in the most haunted cabin in Rhinebeck. It was great. Had a whole host of ghost deer behind us.
It was amazing.
It was pretty great. So we've got 15 minutes before I think Instagram kicks us off of the thing. So coming back around to your concept of sanctuary, what's something that you're doing right now to kind of like build that for yourself in real life?
I've started Olympic weightlifting like five.
What the, how did I not know this? That's amazing.
So yeah, and well, I sort of realized like I'm pushing 40. I have to be careful with like losing bone mass and just muscle mass. And I'm really terrified of gyms. And so now I have a personal trainer. Her name is Tina. She's amazing. She's a power lifter. And I've been finding out that I can do a lot more than I thought. Today, she taught me how to do box squats for the first time, and I box squatted my own body weight, and that feels amazing.
That's so fucking cool. Oh my goodness.
So I'm sort of finding like sanctuary for myself in a space that always felt really intimidating and uncomfortable to me, and it's really mind-bending and amazing.
That is amazing. I'm so proud of you. That's super cool.
So,
I also have like sanctuary literally being your own body.
right, and that's the thing that I was talking about with the idea of, understanding sacredness and how we embody it and that we are part of what is sacred, right? And sort of knowing where to draw the lines between sacred and profane, but we should always be at the center of what we see as sacred. And so, yeah, I'm really enjoying that, right? Because I've done a lot of the work as far as understanding that from like an internal perspective and mental perspective. And I've done martial arts for years, but I still always felt like I was kind of missing a step. And now really understanding that I have strength in ways that I didn't know I had has been really special. And so we'll see. And also I want to have like really cut arms, so stay tuned.
Yes. Okay, so two questions for you. What is your favorite card in the tarot? And what is your current favorite tarot deck? And can people find it at the shop?
Oh gosh, my favorite tarot card. I mean, I love all of them for so many reasons. What am I going to go with? I am going to go with the star card for today, right? Because the star card is the first of the celestials and what comes after all the darkness of like, death, devil, tower. And so the star card, right? It's hope and it's resilience. And people always talk about hope as if it's this pristine, like little, like sort of wispy magical thing. And it's not. Like hope is like gritty and scrappy. And it's like picking yourself up and being like, you know what, everything fucking sucks. And I've fallen on my face so many times, but I'm still going to believe that there is happiness for me at the end of this. And so, I'm going through some really, really big transitions. I'm nearing up on the 2-year anniversary of losing my dad, which is really hard.
Yeah.
Learning how to build a life without, one of my like cornerstones in life has been super challenging. And so star card has been really important for me over the years.
Mm.
As for favorite tarot decks, like I can't pick just one. But so one that I'm really in love with is the Fifth Spirit Tarot, created by Charlie Claire Burgess, and they are an amazing non-binary witch. They go by the word witch, and so they've really embraced that idea of queering and diversifying the tarot. They've created a very contemporary interpretation of Smith Rider Waite that's just really amazing and beautiful and inclusive in so many ways. I love that. And also there's a new tarot called the Mother Tarot by Ren McMurdo, and they created a deck that really analyzes the Empress and Mother archetype in really gentle, soft, new ways. That I think, given our earlier conversation, is a really important one too. And both of those are at my shop because I just love supporting these really amazing indie decks and the work of these like amazing people. So those are two that for me have felt very sort of transformative.
Amazing. Oh, I love this so much. This has been delightful. So you mentioned that the Llamas box is officially launched. Are there any left if people want to buy them?
Yes, so they're a little over a third gone. They're, it's limited quantities, and for summer I always do stuff like smaller runs because I assume that people are not thinking about fiber as much. And definitely go get them if you want. But what I've been working on is dyeing a llamas colorway, and so here's my yarn babies that I've conceived.
Uh,
So I wanted to go for sort of like desert flowers. I was actually thinking of like the beach flowers that I grew up with in Brazil, right? And sort of that like beautiful sandy feel. So this is the yarn that's going in the Fiber Witch boxes. And we have these llamas sunflower enamel pins with like these little witch hats. This is by the witch.
oh my God.
So those are super cute. And, you have a little champagne colored tin of salve that I've made. I don't have everything on hand yet, but Ro created a really beautiful version of her Merino Moon Magic design. She's created a Merino Sun Magic version for us to embody that solar magic, and it's exclusive to us. That's going to be on a tote bag that I can't wait to come in. And it's even printed with some gold metallic ink to give it like that extra like solar power. So I'm really excited, and it's going to include a spell that I've written, which is on embodying that divine masculine energy and the right to take up space and feel empowered by that. Which then is open to all genders, which we all have the right to be here and take up space. So that's also been a really empowering thing for me, is figuring out how to share these bits of magic and personal growth, and have folks understand that it can be a completely non-denominational thing, that doing this empowerment work is for everybody.
Yes.
Very excited, and you can find the link in my profile to grab one if you like.
Perfect. And so folks can also obviously find you at Circle Stitches here, and then also go to circleofstitches.com to be buying things. If you're in Salem, obviously pop by the shop. But if you're not in Salem, you ship around the world, so people can get a little taste of the shop by ordering from you online. And
First,
this hub is
right, knit night on Zoom every Thursday evening.
yes, yes. And you often are teaching also tarot courses. So if tarot is something that you're interested in, you felt like you don't know how to get into it, Anna's a fabulous teacher. And so you can also check that out. And then, yeah, the Sanctuary Hub is officially open. There's actually a tarot spread for Sanctuary amongst the resources because, of course, there is. And so you can go and check out the link in my bio to enter the Sanctuary Hub. And we're just going to keep on rolling with this for the next couple of weeks. Tomorrow we are going to be hanging out with my other good friend Megan Sands from Live Textiles. Megan lives in rural Katumkuk in Newfoundland, and so our internet connection sometimes gets interesting. So be prepared for that. But this has been absolutely delightful, Anna. Thank you so much for hanging out with me and being just generally always a delight of a human.
I love you so much. This is wonderful. I'm so glad that you're my friend.
I am too. This has just been such a good relationship over the years. I'm very, very happy to know you.
Yes, and obviously we'll continue this conversation offline so that people don't have to listen to us ramble for like 8 hours straight.
Yes. But also, if you want to join us and enjoyed this experience of watching us go on so many tangents, if you want to join us for this sanctuary themed retreat, please do pop into the comments or like give us a shout about what you would potentially like to see that look like, and if you have ideas of where that could be hosted. I'm gonna recommend that we either do it here of the border, or potentially we go international. I mean, that could also be fun. I don't know the logistics situation of taking something somewhere, but that could be
obviously a lot of options around me, and of course here's hey Munin. There's definitely options around here, so I'll start doing some research. Yeah, and you guys got to meet Munin, one of my many familiars here. Come here, baby. Yeah, little cute face. Oh, and now you can't see anything.
This is what happens. The familiars are always like, okay, you guys, it's time to stop now.
So I was like, enough, be quiet. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, my love, and I will chat with
on your Sanctuary Hub launch. Oh, Munin. Love you. Bye.